Okay, so Idiotai asked about Noah. He said, could you answer this question? Some would say that Noah getting drunk wasn't a sin because he wasn't under the law. Okay, well, first let me make this observation. It's not a sin according to Scripture to drink, right? It astounds me that so many people think it's wrong to drink when Scripture has so many things about drinking. Even in the Old Testament, it was considered a blessing from the Lord that they would have wine. Um, Canaan is portrayed as when God talks about the promised land, a land flowing with milk and honey, but he also talks about the abundance of wine and so forth that would be theirs. So Scripture most certainly doesn't teach that it's wrong to drink. What it condemns is the abuse of alcohol, getting drunk, and being a drunkard. Right now, the reason this is so important is not only because Scripture teaches it's a blessing from God. Why it's so important to make this distinction that it's okay to drink but not okay to get drunk is because, first of all, Scripture portrays it as a good gift of God. We are not to despise God's gifts. Right? It's okay for a person not to drink. Right? There's no requirement in Scripture to drink. We're forbidden from getting drunk. We're not forbidden from drinking. But it would be wrong to say nobody can drink or I'm not going to drink because it's not okay. No, wine is a blessing from God. It has a purpose in for which God has given it. But one of the other reasons why it's so important to recognize this is because if you say it's wrong to drink, then you make Jesus a sinner because Jesus drank. And it's not possible to say that Jesus was just drinking extremely diluted wine or it was grape juice or something like that for a number of reasons. Number one, remember that Jesus was accused of being a wine bibber, right? In the Gospels, where Jesus says basically, I played the flute, you didn't dance, sang a dirge, you didn't mourn. And what he's saying is, I can't win for losing with you people, right? He said, John the Baptist came neither eating nor drinking, and you say he has a demon. Right, you found an excuse to reject him. The Son of Man came both eating and drinking, and you say he's a glutton and a wine bibber, right? A drunkard, basically. So the very statement presupposes that he's actually drinking wine. They're not criticizing him for drinking, grape juice or something like that. In addition, when Jesus turns water into wine at Cana in John chapter 2, the host comes and says, this is remarkably good wine. Ordinarily, people save the worst wine for last, but the host is marveling that there's this wine is so good, and that's the reason they would do that at a feast is because you'd use the good wine at first, and then when everybody's had enough, right now you can give them the cheap stuff because they're not going to care, kind of thing. They're already going to be somewhat inebriated. And so it just doesn't make sense to say this wasn't really wine. In addition, it doesn't make sense to say it's not talking about wine. And when you look at what Paul says in 2 Corinthians 11 about the Lord's Supper, Paul criticizes the Corinthians because, some of them were getting drunk, right? Some of them were having too much, of their fill and were getting drunk. So you don't get drunk off of grape juice. So it was real wine. Okay, now, you say some people say it wasn't a sin to get drunk because this was prior to the law. There's a mistake that many people make that it's only with the law that you get standards according to which people are to live, right? I don't want to go too much into some of this. It gets detailed, and it opens up a whole bunch of other cans of worms. But there are many things that you find prior to the giving of the law that presuppose some kind of standard that people are aware. I mean, think about it. Paul says in Romans 2 that even the Gentiles who didn't receive the law show the work of the law written on their hearts, right? Because their consciences accuse them or excuse them, right? When they do right, their conscience excuses them. When they do wrong, their conscience convicts them. They have this knowledge of right and wrong apart from the verbal revelation of God in the law to Moses. The law that was given to Moses in the form of the Ten Commandments, for example, it's not like this is the first time that man becomes aware of right and wrong. That's not the point of the Ten Commandments. Rather, that's an external giving of the commandments by God, but it's a concrete inscripturation or revelation of what man already knew in his heart, but which man suppresses, especially unregenerate man. That's why, people will often carve out ways for violating the law and trying to find ways around the law, ways to say this really isn't a violation of that, so on and so forth. But it's just not true to say now. It is true that certain laws don't come along later, laws that can't be identified with that natural knowledge that I'm talking about. When I talk about man having a sense of morality apart from the law, I'm talking about fundamental things like you're supposed to worship the true God. You're not to be a liar. You're not to be a murderer. You're not to be an adulterer. You're not to steal. You're not to bear false witness. You're not to covet. Those sorts of things are known by man just by virtue of being created in God's image. Remember, the law is a reflection. I mean, if we're talking about the moral laws of the Old Testament, the moral laws are a reflection of God's own nature. Man was made in God's image, so man is to reflect God in his thinking and in his actions. And so morality is fundamentally known and unchanging, whether you're talking about before the time of Moses, at the time of Moses, or after the time of Moses. That's why the New Testament repeats those moral laws, right? When the New Testament talks about the law of Moses being set aside, it doesn't mean that now the New Testament has fundamentally altered the morality of the Old Testament, right? You do have a change in the law in the sense that we no longer practice the ceremonies of the law. Those things are no longer binding on Christians. Other aspects of the law are not binding on Christians. That's true. But we as Christians believe that there are moral absolutes, meaning there are things that are absolutely true, that are always binding. We're not relativists. We don't believe that morality changes. We're not like people who say, oh, you're wrong to condemn homosexuality. It's 2020, welcome to the 21st century. You need to catch up with the times. We don't believe that morality changes with the ticking of the clock. It's not like the clock strikes 12 or we hit the new year, 2001, and suddenly there's a new system of morality. Now it's okay to engage in debauchery, right? It's 2001. It's okay now. Now it's okay to commit infanticide, parricide, genocide, right? No, we're Christians. We believe the law is a reflection of God's character, and that's true before, during, and after the time of Moses. So I would say that, I think a person would have a better case to make that Noah didn't know that he was going to get drunk. Maybe somebody could say that, but that's not going to work either. Noah wasn't, just because Noah is now inhabiting the new world doesn't mean that he's a spring chicken, right? Noah was hundreds of years old by the time of the flood. I think he was 600 years old. I could have my numbers off. Noah wasn't a spring chicken. He knows what happens when you drink too much wine. So that's how I would answer that.